Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and we're here today with something I'm super excited about. You guys have been asking for a long time for upgraded videos, or upgrade videos, of the Budget Magic series, and this is the first one. I'm finally getting around to doing it. So first a little word about this series. It will mostly be upgrades of Budget Magic decks. So in the articles each week, I post the normal budget list that we play in the videos. I post an ultra budget list, which is the cheapest possible way to build the archetype. And then I usually post a non-budget list. So the non-budget list is what we're kind of focusing on in this series. And this won't be for every Budget Magic. Sometimes when I play Budget Magic, I play a deck. I like playing it. It's a lot of fun to make the videos. I love doing it. But then I kind of put it on the shelf, forget about it, move on to the next thing. Other times, I come across a deck that I just really love, and I keep playing it and tuning it in my free time, and I just fall in love with the deck. So this series will focus on those decks. So don't expect every Budget Magic to have an upgrade video, but every once in a while, we'll have some special editions of the upgrade series focusing on decks that I really like, and I love to brew with and keep building and tuning. So this is the first one. We also may feature some decks that are not on Budget Magic. Right now, I'm doing two video series on a weekly basis, Budget Magic and Against the Odds. Budget Magic, show off some cheap, inexpensive decks under $100. Against the Odds, we have no price limit. It's the voting, community voting, and then we build a deck based around that, and it's usually something kind of wacky and different that's against the odds, as the series name says. So this might also feature some decks that are too expensive for Budget Magic, too competitive for Against the Odds. But don't worry, I'm not going to be playing Jeskai Black, not going to be playing Abzan. But if I come across something that's really spicy and fun and a little bit tier 2 or below the radar or roguish, it might pop up in the series even if it doesn't have a Budget Magic to go alongside it. Anyway, today's deck is kind of halfway between those two camps. This is an upgrade of the Rally Vampire deck that we played on Budget Magic in Modern a while ago. But it is also its own thing, because with Rally Vampires, we had 8 Blood Artists, but one of those Blood Artists was Callisto Highborn, which required us to play a ton of vampires for it to really be a Blood Artist. Well, Battle for Zendikar came along, gave us Zulaport Cutthroat, so we have another actual legitimate Blood Artist that doesn't require vampires, and as a result, we don't have to play vampires. We have all this freedom to play whatever we want. Like, the possibilities are endless. So you will see very few vampires in this deck. There are a few holdovers. So this isn't an upgrade as much as it is a reinvention of the archetype based on the new cards that were printed. So let's talk about this deck. As you can see, this isn't budget friendly. $532 in paper, $210 online. That said, I will include a budget version because a lot of the money is tied up in the mana base. So I will include a budget version in the article on mtggoldfish.com. So make sure to check that out if you're interested in a cheaper build of the deck. So let's talk about some cards. First off, we have the foundation of the deck, our 8 Blood Artists. Blood Artists, a 0/1 for 1 and a black. Whenever another creature dies, or Blood Artist for that matter, target player loses a life, you gain a life. Then, thanks to Battle for Zendikar, we get 4 copies of Zulaport Cutthroat, a 1/1 for 1 and a black. Whenever another creature you control dies, or Zulaport Cutthroat, of course, each opponent loses a life, you gain a life. So, while there's some slight differences that I'm not going to bother you with during this intro video, because I already tend to be too long-winded in these things, basically, these are the same card in our deck. We use them to sacrifice a bunch of our creatures, get a bunch of triggers, and win the game. Speaking of sacrificing our creatures, that's where Viscera Seer and Cartel Aristocrat come in. These are, in my opinion, the 2 best sack outlets in Modern. Viscera Seer is great because it costs 1 mana, it's only a 1/1, but whenever you sack, you get to scry, so that helps us put together whatever pieces we're missing for the deck. Cartel Aristocrat is great because it's super resilient. We can sack a creature, which remember is what we're trying to do anyway, so we don't mind sacking something, give it protection, which allows it to dodge Path to Exile, allows it to dodge a Lightning Bolt, a Kolaghan's Command, also allows it to block anything in the format, which is something the other sack outlet, like Bloodthrone Vampire, which used to be in the deck, can't really do with consistency. So this is the main framework of the deck. These are the 4 cards that have to be in the archetype to make it work. The old deck was very dependent on these cards. The only way we won the game was by getting a bunch of Blood Artist triggers. In our new build, we are still dependent on that, but we have a second combo built in. Now, instead of grinding our opponent off 5 damage, 7 damage a turn over the course of a few turns, we have the ability to just win out of nowhere with RallyFenza, Kintree Spirit, and Safehold Elite. So you've probably seen RallyFenza in Modern before. She has been known to combo off with a Kitchen Finks for infinite life, or a Murderous Redcap for infinite damage. Well, we're using her the same way, in conjunction with a Persist creature, but our Persist creature is a little different. Probably haven't seen too much Safehold Elite in Modern. Safehold Elite is just a 2-mana 2/2, and it has Persist. So how Persist works, if you're not familiar, whenever the creature dies, if it didn't have a -1/-1 counter, you return it to the battlefield with a -1/-1 counter. So when Safehold Elite dies, comes back to the battlefield as a 2/2 with a -1/-1 counter, so it's a 1/1. RallyFenza, whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield, you get to bolster 1, which means you put a +1/+1 counter on the creature with the lowest toughness. Well, since 1 is as low as it gets, we can always put that counter on our Safehold Elite when the Safehold Elite's coming back from the graveyard. So how this works is with our sack outlet, we sack Safehold Elite, goes to the graveyard, comes back into play with a -1/-1 counter, and RallyFenza looks around and says, hey, something came into play, I should bolster. So it bolsters Safehold Elite, which removes that -1/-1 counter, making it a 2/2 again. Then we can sack it again, goes to the graveyard, comes back, and RallyFenza puts a counter on it. We can do this an infinite amount of times. So why would we want to go through this little loop infinite amount of times? Well, because we can deal infinite damage with a Blood Artist or a Zulaport Cutthroat on the battlefield. And while it doesn't really come into play as often, because infinite damage usually gets the job done, at the same time we are also gaining infinite life. Even without one of those on the battlefield, we can infinitely scry with our Vizier Seer, which allows us to find a Blood Artist or a Zulaport Cutthroat to finish off the combo. So it's just super sweet. So we have these 2 different axes we're attacking on, and it makes the deck so much better. It's excellent. Finally, our last creature, Satyr Wayfinder. You're probably like, huh, what is Satyr Wayfinder doing in our deck? That doesn't really work with the combo. Satyr Wayfinder's a graveyard card. Its ability is you look at the top 4 cards of your library, put a land in your hand, dump the rest in the graveyard. Well, Satyr Wayfinder makes a little more sense when you consider, yes, we still have our Return to the Ranks and Rally the Ancestors. These are the big payoff cards that go along with all the triggers we're generating from Blood Artists, all the creatures we're sacking with our Cartel Aristocrats. These are the cards that usually win us the game. So both of these cards return usually all of our creatures from the graveyard to the battlefield for a very low amount of mana. Return to the Ranks, 2 white and X, same as Rally the Ancestors actually. It has Convoke, so it's even cheaper than that sometime. Return X target creature cards with converted mana cost 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Now, if you think back to our creatures, every single one has a converted mana cost of 2 or less, so we can get back any of our creatures that we want with Return to the Ranks. Another cool addition in this deck is we have some white creatures, so we can actually cast Return to the Ranks for free a lot of times with our RallyFenzas and our Safehold Elites tapping to make the white mana, our Blood Artists, Zulaport Cutthroats tapping to make colorless mana, so we can do this even when we tap out on our lands, which adds a ton more combo potential to the deck. We can combo off much more quickly and more powerfully than we could with Rally Vampires. Rally the Ancestors, on the other hand, 2 white and X, returns each creature with converted mana cost X or less from our graveyard to the battlefield, then we have to exile them at the beginning of our upkeep. Rally is sweet because it works at instant speed, so we can dump a bunch of creatures in our graveyard, either with Satyr Wayfinder or by sacking them with our Cartel Aristocrats and our Vizier Seers, and then we can get them back anytime we want to, even on our opponent's turn, go through our little combo, get a bunch more triggers, sometimes infinitely combo with our RallyFenza. And since we have these sack outlets, the exile trigger never really affects us because we can just sack everything back to the graveyard in response to that trigger. So these are our big payoff cards. So the basic idea is, just to reiterate before we move on through the rest of the deck, we get a bunch of Blood Artists on the battlefield. we get at least one sack outlet on the battlefield. We sack a bunch of stuff to get a bunch of Blood Artist triggers. We get them all back with Rally of the Ancestors Return to the Ranks. We win over the course of 2 or 3 turns through a bunch of these triggers from sacking everything and getting them all back. On the other hand, we sometimes just randomly infinitely combo off if we happen to have the RallyFenza and the Saffron Elite on the battlefield at the same time. The last 2 main deck cards, non-land main deck cards, for collected companies. When I first built this upgraded list, I was playing straight black-white, and that deck was still good, but one of the problems I ran into is sometimes we'd run out of fuel. We get clunky draws where we draw too many lands. We would sometimes fizzle out a little bit and just not have enough creatures. Collected Company takes care of that problem, and it also provides another way to just win out of nowhere. Like, we can sometimes have a Blood Artisan of Viscera on the battlefield. Doesn't look all that threatening. Then all of a sudden at the end of our opponent's turn, or whenever they tap out, we Collected Company, hit a RallyFenza, hit a Saffron Elite, and just win the game on the spot, and our opponent doesn't even know what hit him. So Collected Company adds a ton of resilience and power to this deck. Finally, our little lonesome Path to Exile. I don't know, maybe this could be something better. I don't know if it's really worth playing 1 removal spell, just because the odds of us drawing it are pretty slim, but sometimes it's nice to have the ability to kill something. The lands, 9 fetches. We have 4 Marsh Flats, 3 Windswept East, 2 Verdant Catacombs, 6 shock lands, 2 of each on color shock, so 2 Temple Gardens, 2 Overgrown Tombs, 2 Godless Shrines, and then 6 basics, give us a little protection against Blood Moons, 3 Swamps, 2 Plains, and a single Forest. As far as the sideboard, really breaks down into 3 pieces. We have 6 discard spells. We have 2 addresses, 4 thought seizes. These protect us against counter spells, make sure we can resolve our important spells like the Rally and Return to the Ranks. They also are a proactive answer to some really troublesome hate cards. The worst hate card, the hardest one to beat, is Rest in Peace, because it exiles our graveyard for one thing, but it also stops all of our Blood Artist triggers. Both Thoughtseize and Duress are a proactive way to get rid of that. Also, Grafdigger's Cage is pretty annoying. Anything that messes with the graveyard, Leyline of the Void, for instance. And that is why, those cards are why we have 3 Disenchants. Seems a little excessive, but it's a great way to get rid of those hate cards that really can just ruin our day. The Rest in Peace, Leyline of the Void, Grafdigger's Cage, and so forth. The 2 Stony Silences, those are there for affinity primarily, but they also can come in against Tron and shut down all the eggs, and they randomly hose some fringe strategies like that Carrot Clan Ironworks decks we played a while ago. The rest of the Path to Exile, so 3 more Pass and 1 Dismember, those are mostly there to deal with the Twin combo. We really do a good job of shutting down ground creature decks. Our deck could care less about Tarmogoyf. Because our plan is to sack our creatures anyway, we can just do our sacking during combat, so we block something, sack it. It's really hard for our opponent to get through with ground creatures. The creatures that can give us trouble are things with trample, so like a Siege Rhino can be kind of problematic, or things with flying. So Vendilion Click, things of that nature can beat us down, and we can't really interact well with that. So if we're worried about flyers or trampling creatures that can get through our ample ground defense, we can bring in some more removal there too. I've had a ton of success with this deck since I got to this current build, and like I said, started off straight black-white, tested Kitchen Finks, Murderous Redcap, didn't have our collected companies, finally got around to this build. Since I've gotten around to this build, I think I'm 7-1 on Magic Online, and it just always feels good. It feels extremely powerful. It's extremely resilient because we don't care about our opponent's removal. Sure, you got Terminate, Liliana the Veil. Those cards just don't bother us because we're getting triggers when you kill our creatures anyway. We're getting everything back from the graveyard. And with the addition of the RallyFenza Saffron Elite combo, we can randomly win the game as early as turn 4 with an infinite combo, which just adds a whole nother level of power to the deck. So I've been really impressed with it. I can't recommend it enough. I've had a blast playing it. I think it's seriously a very powerful and very good deck. So give it a shot. If you're not interested in putting out $500 in paper or 210 ticks, like I said before, make sure to check out the article on mtggoldfish.com. I will have the budget list posted there, a little make it a little cheaper to play something very similar that really plays the same way. The main deductions for the budget are cutting back on the mana base, which makes it less consistent, but as far as how the deck plays, it doesn't change it too much. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to check out mtggoldfish.com. Decks, prices, and metagame, basically everything and anything you could want for Magic the Gathering. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Thanks for watching, and I will talk to you all soon.